For example, once it's been determined where and how high to build the scaffold, sills are placed on the ground where the scaffold legs will be positioned, and screw jacks with base plates are put on top of the sills. Then the vertical end frames are lowered onto the screw jacks. Cross braces are then connected between the two end frames to strengthen the scaffold. At this point, a bubble level is used to level and plumb the framework to ensure that the scaffold will be stable. And the base plates are nailed to the sills. The first section of the scaffold ladder is then put in place, and a scaffold plank is laid across the tops of the end frames so that the builders can assemble the next level. The assembly procedure is basically repeated at this point. Two more vertical end frames are placed onto coupling pins in the lower end frames, and each frame leg is secured with a locking pin. Then cross braces are added to stabilize the upper end frames. The next step is to insert vertical guardrail posts into the tops of the upper end frames. Then scaffold planks are added to create the work platform, and another section of ladder is attached. Toe boards are then added on all four sides of the scaffold floor, and upper and middle guardrails are connected between the guardrail posts. To complete the scaffold erection, the builders use wire to secure the toe boards and flooring planks to the scaffold framework. Then they attach the final section of ladder to a guardrail post and install a green tag to indicate that the scaffold is safe to use. The proper care and use of a tubular welded frame scaffold is very similar to other types of fixed scaffolds. For example, the scaffold should be inspected before each use to ensure that it remains in good condition. Also, workers who use the scaffold must follow the same basic safety guidelines that apply to other types of scaffolds. The disassembly of a tubular welded frame scaffold is basically the reverse of the assembly. After the green tag is removed to indicate that the scaffold is unsafe for workers, the toe boards are removed from around the scaffold flooring. Then the upper and middle guardrails are removed, along with the guardrail posts. The upper sections of the ladder are then disconnected, and the scaffold flooring is removed. Then the upper cross braces are taken off, and the upper end frames are lifted off of the lower end frames. The lower cross braces are removed next, along with the last section of ladder. Finally, the lower end frames are lifted off of the screw jacks and base plates. The screw jacks and base plates are then removed from the sills, and the remaining components are returned to their normal storage area. A pneumatic scaffold is a type of portable lifting device that uses pressurized air to raise and lower a work platform. Pneumatic scaffolds are often used in cramped work areas or in areas where electric lifts or gasoline-powered lifts aren't permitted. In this part of the program, we'll look at some of the basic features of a pneumatic scaffold, and we'll see how the scaffold is used. Here's the pneumatic scaffold that we'll use for our discussion. It has a work platform, or floor, for the worker to stand on, and a protective cage to prevent the worker from falling off. A pneumatic hoist mechanism is used to move the scaffold up and down a cable. One end of the cable is reeved around a drum inside the hoist mechanism, and the other end is attached to a beam or a similar support overhead. The hoist mechanism is controlled by a hand lever that regulates the flow of compressed air, and by a directional control valve that has three basic positions: up to raise the scaffold, down to lower the scaffold, and lock to hold the scaffold in a particular position. The scaffold also has an emergency or secondary brake mechanism to lock onto the cable if the scaffold moves down the cable at too fast a rate. A manual cranking handle is available in case the hoist mechanism fails, and the scaffold has to be manually raised or lowered along the cable. The airline oil system has two vessels. One vessel is the oil reservoir. It displays the oil level in the system. The other vessel is a condensation trap. It removes moisture that could corrode components in the air system. Before the scaffold is used, the moisture should be drained from the vessel by depressing a valve stem in the bottom of the vessel. The safe operation of a pneumatic scaffold depends largely on how the support cables are rigged overhead. Different methods can be used to rig a pneumatic scaffold, depending on the exact type of scaffold and where it's being rigged. Always follow the manufacturer's guidelines for rigging a pneumatic scaffold, and be sure to attach a safety line near the location of the cable attachment. Before a pneumatic scaffold is used, it should undergo a quick inspection of all the major components. This inspection should include the airline oil system, as well as all the basic controls and safety features. The hoist cable should be checked to make sure that it's properly reeved around the drum in the hoist mechanism, and the cage and work platform should be visually inspected for damage or deterioration. This operator has completed the basic checks, so he attaches a fall protection line to a rope grab on the safety line that's connected overhead. Then he sets the directional control valve to the up position and lifts the hand control lever for the hoist mechanism to start the flow of compressed air through the system. As long as the operator keeps the control lever lifted, the hoist mechanism will pull the scaffold up along the cable. To lower the scaffold, the operator simply moves the directional control valve to the down position and lifts the hand control lever. This basically reverses the direction of the hoist mechanism so that the scaffold will move down along the cable. Hydraulic scaffolds are available in a variety of forms, but they all work on the same basic principle. A motor of some type powers a hydraulic pump, which, in turn, drives a hydraulic cylinder to raise or lower a work platform. In this part of the program, we'll examine the basic features of a hydraulic scaffold, and we'll see how the scaffold works. Here's the hydraulic scaffold that we'll use for our discussion. Among the major components of this scaffold are a floor or platform for a worker to stand on, and a cage to prevent the worker from falling off the platform. The work platform is attached to an upright or mast that's divided into different sections so that it can basically telescope up and down. A battery supplies power to an electric motor, which drives the hydraulic system and enables an operator to raise and lower the work platform. Outriggers that are equipped with screw jacks are used to level and stabilize the scaffold while it's in use. The basic operating controls for the scaffold include a main on and off switch and an emergency stop switch, both of which can be activated from the ground. The hydraulic scaffold also has operating controls within the caged work platform area. These controls include an emergency shutoff switch and an enabling switch, which is used together with either an up switch to raise the work platform or a down switch to lower the platform. Let's watch as this worker uses the hydraulic scaffold. He starts by turning the screw jacks on the outriggers to level the scaffold. He can verify that the scaffold is level by checking a bubble level on the scaffold's frame. Next, he does a walk-around inspection of the scaffold's major components. He looks for any obvious damage or excessive wear. When he's ready to use the scaffold, he places any tools or supplies that he'll need on the work platform. Then he makes sure that the emergency stop switch is released, and he sets the main on and off switch to on. Next, he enters the caged work platform and attaches a fall protection line to one of the bars of the cage. He then makes sure that the emergency shutoff valve is released, and he uses the enabling switch along with the up switch to raise the work platform. As the scaffold moves upward, the worker is careful to keep his entire body within the caged area of the work platform. When he reaches the work area, he releases the up switch to stop the scaffold. He then performs the necessary work from the platform. When he's ready to come down, he presses the enabling switch and the down switch on the control panel. This lowers the scaffold to ground level. He then exits the caged work platform and sets the main switch to off.